because when I was reading more about this, I felt the impact this technology could have. And if at least half of the hopes that people have on this come true, like this could change like humanity, like completely. I'm here with Ladan Jiracek, the PhD student in the electrical engineering department at the University of Florida, host of the Neural Implant podcast and host of the Travel Wisdom podcast, both amazing podcasts. So first question is more on the philosophical side. Do you think it's possible? I'm not asking. I just want yes, no, or yes with a caveat. That's it. Do you think it's possible that we'll get to a point where the Matrix, the movie, the devices that you use, is that like that comes to reality?
Maybe it's already reality. Maybe we were already plugged in.
Okay, you got me there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, sure, why not? Why not? Like, it's honestly, a lot of what they do is not that out of the realm of possibility. And, yeah, like, it's very possible, I would say.
Okay, having said that, I think the first thing I wanted to go with you was your background and how do you came to these problems, because you've done your mechanical engineering degree in bachelor's. You did biological cell, like microbiology, biophysics as a master's, and now you're doing electrical engineering. So it kind of has been like a jump, but I imagine it has all come to these problems that you're tackling now. Maybe you can say, how did you get there? Like, what was the journey? And what are those problems that you're researching right now that made it exciting for you to join the lab and the university?
Yeah, so right now I'm doing, like you said, electrical engineering in neural interfaces, brain-computer interfaces, neural implants, and we do the design and fabrication of these devices, and with especially an eye to making sure that they last. Because you put something in the body wants to attack it. It's called the foreign body response, and the body tries to like either destroy it or isolate it, kind of wall it off with scar tissue. And so we don't want that to happen, because when you do that, you kind of isolate the electrical properties and everything like this from that. I mean, you want to have a direct, be directly plugged into the nervous system, the nerves, neurons, everything like this. But obviously, if the body's trying to prevent you from doing that's really bad. So we do accelerated testing, accelerated aging, and we just kind of want to see, 10 years down the line, is that still going to be, working the way that you want it to be working, or is the body going to try to destroy it and wall it off? So that's kind of the problem that we're working on, and we do different materials and fabrication methods to be able to do that. Yeah, so this is something that's actually been stuck in my head, implanted, you might say, for the last decade.
You've done that joke before.
Definitely have. I did an internship during my bachelor's in mechanical engineering at University of Utah. I did my internship at a company called BlackRock Microsystems, and they make these implantable Utah electrode array is what it's called. And it's basically like this bed of spikes that they put into the brain, and then each spike can read a different neuron, and then you can do things like control robotic arms, and they've implanted these into people. These are FDA approved, so they've been implanted about a dozen people, and you can control robotic arms, you can feel things, all this kind of stuff. So it's very futuristic stuff. And that was like 2012 or something like that. So, 10 years ago, and I worked there, and it was a lot of fun. But a lot of these questions that kind of came up, this foreign body response, glial scarring is what it's called, kind of the body walls it off. Those were definitely big themes, and that's something that we wanted to fix there. And so ever since then, it was just kind of like in my head, and I wanted to be able to fix that. And then, I went to Germany and was doing my stuff, kind of fun a little bit off to the side, and then I realized when I finished that, like, I want to go back into the brain computer interfaces. That's the only thing that's held my attention for a long time. Everything else is like, oh, this is fun, but like, after a few months, I drop it or something like that. But yeah, so that's basically it. And then I already had the Travel Wisdom podcast for a few years, so I knew how to do podcasting. I knew how to do that, and so I'm just like, okay. By that time, I was outside of the academic system, and so I didn't know what everybody was doing, and I didn't have access to academic papers. They're like $40 a paper, or like $400 to access the journal. I'm just like, no, I'm good. I'm going to talk to the professors themselves and ask them, like, hey, what are you doing? What are you working on? And then from that, find like the perfect PhD, because that's what I realized I wanted to do. And that's exactly what I did. And that's how the podcast started. And now I'm here at University of Florida. Mission accomplished. I did it. And it's a very weird way to find a PhD, but weird things can be endearing to some people. And some people are just like, I've never seen that before. You're just so crazy that I have to take you on, So that works sometimes.
Was that what happened?
That's what happened. Yeah. So I interviewed like 40 people or something like that, and of those there was like 3 that I was really excited about, or thought that was they were doing especially good work or something that I liked, and one of them was here, and he had like an opening, and so and then the timing worked on both ends, and so yeah, literally he's just like, come on over, and like a week later I was over, and so that was a lab tech job actually here just across the street, and then the plan was to do biomedical engineering PhD with him, but funding didn't go through, then I was like, oh shoot, what am I going to do? So now I came here all the way across the street to a collaborating lab that is actually more aligned with what I like, and so it worked out in the end. But so this guy, the second one that I'm actually doing my PhD with, he's not so excited about the podcasting, but the first one was, and so it's kind of funny because this one it's just lost on him, But we'll talk about it later, like the benefits of it. But and I've tried to explain it to him. I'm just like, no, this is really cool, but he's just like, do your work.
Cool. Yeah, we'll talk about the podcast later. So yeah, I think this is a good place to just step back and ask what the heck is a brain-computer interface, and yeah, like in the general definition, and yeah, for example, could you argue that a phone is like our phones that we're using are brain-computer interfaces?
I've heard that they can be considered prosthetics, so
Okay.
something, or like what was it called? Cyberonic. Wait, what's it called? A cyber. Oh no, I can't think of the word. Whatever.
No worries.
Robotic cyborg. Cyborg. Yeah.
Cyborg related stuff. Yeah.
So I've heard that, and there you could make an argument that like contact lenses, that's part of your body and it augments your body,
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. Phones too, like I guess it could be part of your body. Like if you lose it, then you really feel nervous about losing it, going around for a whole day or something like that without your phone. It's almost like being naked. So yeah, you could argue that it's something that augments your body, that's part of your body, and yeah, so there's precedent for this. This already does kind of exist.
So brain-computer interfaces would be kind of that same idea, but for the brain specifically.
It was specifically for the brain, exactly. And the way I think of it is that it's directly plugged into the brain, kind of like the Matrix, like what you're talking about, and that it somehow directly interfaces. It's an invasive thing that directly interfaces with your nervous system. There are wearable systems as well that don't require you to open up your brain or do something crazy like that. It can be like a helmet or headphones or something like this that you wear, and that also interfaces with your nervous system. So yeah, it's kind of an open thing, and we can get into that. I don't like arguing definitions too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's definitely a possibility.
Okay, so yeah, I think when I was started to reading about this stuff, I, for example, thought that like I thought of it as a device, but for me, I thought of it as 2 independent devices, or like 2 things that did different activities. One was just sensing what was happening in your brain, and the other one was sending signals to affect your brain somehow, doing something with that. Is is that like there's devices that probably can do the same thing, uh, but that's like the idea, right? Just get something, get information from the brain, and do something with that, and also affect the brain somehow to accomplish a goal. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, 100%. And kind of like what you were saying too, it doesn't need to be two devices that does that. I mean, it can be one device. It can be the same electrode, is what you call it, same input-output location. And, you can send signal, receive signal, stimulate, and receive. So,
So
that's very
one
accurate.
question is that you just mentioned electrode. Why electricity? Why not just pour chemicals into the brain, or why not just touch the brain and like do mechanical interactions with it and see what happens? Like, why electricity?
Yeah, I mean, actually, those are all very good other ways to
Okay.
interact with the brain. So, and then there's light actually too. So
And
there's something
light.
called optogenetics,
Okay.
and then you can transfect, the cells. You can basically put a benign, like a virus. Almost like the glow in the dark jellyfish, or these glow in the dark animals. You can basically have the cell express that, and again, you can write and receive information to the neuron. But the reason we usually use electricity is because that's how neural cells communicate between each other. So they have an axon, which is like a wire, and then a myelin cover, which is almost like the insulator. When you're touching a wire, you want it to be insulated, otherwise you get shocked. And obviously, if you have a bunch of these wires together, they would have all kind of crazy interactions. So you want to have this insulating thing. But that's basically how it sends a signal between one neuron to another. And neurons can get very big. From your toes to your brain is probably only like 3 neurons difference, 4 neurons jumps.
Cool.
So you can imagine, like, some of these neurons can be over a meter long. One human cell is over a meter long, and then if you can imagine, giraffes have the same thing.
Okay.
So from the bottom to the top of a giraffe is many meters, and that's one cell. For the
Interesting.
majority of that. So it sends it chemically, and then it sends it electrically, and then sends it chemically again. So within the actual neuron itself, from one end to the other, it's sending it electrically, and it's using ion channels, which is kind of a fancy way to do electricity.
Okay.
With the biological system, the body kind of figured out how to do electricity in this way. But then between one nerve to the other nerve, the one neuron to the other neuron, is a very, very tiny gap, like very, very small, submicron, and that actually is bridged. That the neurochemicals kind of bridge those. So if you've ever heard the word dopamine or serotonin, GABA, that's actually what's making the jump. And so you can do that too. You can shake these little pockets that have the chemicals and force the cell to send it out, and then you can cause it to fire. And then also you can physically move it, and you can use movement or ultrasound. Sound is kind of waves going through the body and everything like this. So you can force these cells to move, and you can activate them like this too. So whatever turns on the neuron, it works. And neurons communicate with what's called action potential, and you can think about it like firing a gun. Either you fired a gun or you didn't fire a gun. Like, there's nothing in between. There's not like, oh, I fired half of the gun or something like this. No, it's like, and you have a voltage signal, and it just has a really high and really low boom boom signal, and that means the neuron fired. And then it's connected to hundreds or thousands of other neurons, and depending on the chemistry and setup and everything like this, the first neuron firing might cause a second one to fire, which might cause a third one or something like this. And it's just this chain reaction that we don't really understand. It's incredibly complicated, because that first one is connected to 1,000, which is connected to 1,000 more, which is connected to 1,000 more. Boom, we have a billion neurons that we just connected to within 3 steps. So yeah, it's very complicated. It's huge, and but we're figuring it out because of computers, essentially. But hopefully that was, I don't know, that was clear.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was
Okay.
amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and you touched on everything that I wanted to cover, like the complexity, but also that we're making steps into the understanding. Like, it was really cool how Tim Urban, in the article you sent me, Wait But Why, you should check it out. It's explaining, it's like we know the high level how it works, because you can see always in like your high school classes that this part does the motion part, this part does the perception side, this is where you have your memory. And as you were explaining, you know, like the tiniest, the small scale, the interactions there, but everything in between, we have no idea. So how do you approach that? How do you approach that having no idea into making it something useful, like even getting that data or just send that data? Like what data do you send? Or when you get the data from the brain, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is you don't know. And you just kind of keep doing something until something works. I guess level 2 of that is computers will figure it out, and computers will do that. But also the brain will figure it out. So you may have heard about brain plasticity and how well the brain can learn to do different things. If I put you into a room with a violin for a week and I said, like, you will die unless, you learn the violin. You'll learn the violin, it's not a problem. And you can learn skills throughout your life, even in adulthood. Maybe it becomes harder or something like this, but you can learn languages, instruments, whatever, new sports or something like this, because the brain is plastic. The brain rewires itself. It's another thing that we don't really understand. All those connections can get weaker or stronger, or maybe it makes a completely new connection that didn't exist before, and that's essentially what learning is. But in the end, I mean, you can just have these random electrodes, these random points where you send electricity, where you can interface with these neurons, and then the brain just figures it out. Brain's like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, I have a stimulation all of a sudden, and every time I want to move an arm or something like this, this stimulation happens. So somehow, some way, the brain learns that, like, this is what it wants, and you can actually train the brain to work with these very crude, stimulations, these very crude devices put into it and interfacing with it. And then the brain just learns and does its magic, and then it can actually do something. So that's why this company that I was mentioning, BlackRock Microsystems, you can put in these essentially needles into the brain and stimulate them and read them and everything like this. And people have controlled robotic arms and like come pick up a bottle, drink it, this kind of stuff. One guy, he fist bumped Obama, and he felt it. And it's amazing stuff. But the brain just kind of goes through the noise and just learns it. And that's honestly, it's not that we're really good. It's not that us as scientists are really smart. It's just the brain is so good that it just figures it out. And we give it crap. And then the brain's like, okay,
I can do it.
I can do it. Yeah.
That, yeah. Okay. So
fine.
knowing that complexity and knowing that the brain can be plastic and figure it out, and now maybe we can put our hats of creativity and imagination, and maybe we could touch for a couple of minutes what are the possibilities. Like, from what we said, we have a device that can send and receive signals to the brain. We can, just with that, we can extrapolate it and come up with the craziest things. So maybe we can start with the most believable ones. Like, what are like really amazing applications? For example, just what you were saying, like being able to control a robot arm with your brain, that kind of already sounds sci-fi. It's like, what the heck is it? And what other ways? I wanted to ask you, for example, on the more believable side, how can this technology could potentially impact in the future, or maybe even right now, the health of a person? Like, what are potential benefits in our own health with this technology?
Yeah, so as you say, like, this sci-fi controlling robotic arms, not everybody needs that. There's not that many amputees. Yes. So it would be better to have something that could help everybody.
But I do wanted to emphasize, just that thing exists right now, that is already mind blowing, and not only mind blowing in the technical side, and it's also like life changing for those people. Like, just Google those videos and you can see like persons that have been incapacitated or like cannot move for years or ever, like in their lives, and that now they can feed themselves and be able to feel things. That's just life, and you can just see it in the expressions of their face, right? That, like, just doing this kind of work that is already here, you're improving the life of somebody like in unimaginably. So how could that again be applied to maybe not everybody that's has some sort of like disease or yeah, it's like not everybody is lacking arms or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's something that's really exciting for me, is basically interfacing with the peripheral nervous system. So you have the central nervous system, which is the brain. Peripheral nervous system is going everywhere else in the body. And what's especially exciting for me is something called bioelectronic medicine. And so interfacing with the organs of the body, because the organs also have nerves going in and out, sending and receiving signals. And so what they're finding is that you can control stuff like inflammation, and so basically arthritis, a lot of these kind of things that you wouldn't expect. I mean, they've also looked at.
So is it kind of like sending the signal to the organ is like don't swell?
Yeah, exactly.
Shit. Yeah,
Exactly.
okay.
And I mean, you can think about the pacemaker as well. Like, you don't have to have a pacemaker with its own thing. Like, you could just have the brain sending the signal, and other signals. So like pancreas to create insulin. Even in diabetics, there's insulin cells. There are cells that are alive, and so you could theoretically, instead of having an insulin pump or injecting yourself with insulin if you're diabetic, you could just have a neurostimulator that tells the pancreas to secrete insulin. So stuff like this. So you can kind of bypass a lot of pharmaceuticals and just endogenously from the body itself, you could create this stuff. Maybe there's some signal that got lost or something like this, or maybe the signal's not strong enough. But with the external device, you could actually overpower that and create your own insulin, or do this inflammation thing. So that's really cool. That's a very promising thing for me, because it's like, okay, we can get rid of pharmaceuticals theoretically, and we don't have to flood our body with chemicals to have it apply in one area. The pancreas is like a 1 or 2 pound, organ, and we're flooding hundreds of pounds, 100 plus pounds of our tissue with some kind of God knows what kind of drug and what kind of side effects, and maybe it takes weeks to finally work, and then you want to stop it, then it takes weeks to get out of your system, and God knows what it's doing to your endocrine system, hormones, everything like this. But with a neurostimulator, you turn it on, you turn it off, boom, boom, it's working, it's on, it's off, so it can start working within minutes, and it can stop working within minutes. So if you're like, I'm done, then theoretically, that's how fast
for
it
that
works.
specific example, just to be more skeptical, is it just that easy as sending the signal of just don't swell to the organ? Or do you think it might be more of a challenge that we're sending a signal that we think it might tell don't swell, but it might have like unexpected outcomes, kind of like the chemical drug?
Yeah, definitely. That is something that happens, and the way the swelling, the inflammatory response, they think it goes through the spleen and through what's called the vagus nerve, which is a bundle of nerves that goes kind of zigzags through your body and connects to a lot of organs. But as you can imagine, if you're trying to connect if you're trying to stimulate this, you might be stimulating that whole bundle or a different part of the bundle than you think, and it might be stimulating a different part, different organ or something like this. And there could be side effects. Or what's very common is, because the vagus nerve goes next to the throat, usually you can have a wearable device next to the throat, and that stimulates it. But as you can imagine, if you're stimulating your throat, you might have hoarseness in your throat, or
What is hoarseness?
like kind of feeling like itchiness too,
Okay.
or kind of like a deep voice, or like you kind of, your voice sounds weird or feels weird.
Just because
And,
there's a device in here?
because there's a device there and it's
Okay.
stimulating. It's like electrically enabling it or turning it on, and it's doing weird stuff that the body wouldn't do. So you can get weird side effects. So it's like kind of, I would say, uncomfortable side effects, or maybe not so harmful, I would argue, versus chemicals in your body, God knows
Yeah.
what's going on where. But this is like, oh, I feel like I have an itchy throat or something like
Right,
this
right.
whenever it's turned
And
on.
they would be for sure counterbalanced by the potential benefits of it.
Yeah, yeah.
For sure. And
You have to decide if it's worth it for you.
Exactly. So, yeah, we can touch about that. Like, I would say that it's always going to be like a personal decision, right? Whether to do it or
Yeah,
not.
of course.
But, like, we touched on the health, like, more on the, like, physical health that we can see. Also, I was thinking that there could be, like, many psychological benefits, too, right? When you have something tap into your brain that kind of knows, like, just receiving signals, you could exploit that in many interesting ways. For example, you could have a log of, oh, I'm eating my lunch and I know because of the data in my brain that I'm collecting, this made me feel bad, or I'm with this person and this kind of made me feel awkward. Is that kind of like possibilities that you can see? It's like basically more like introspection, with aided introspection, like knowing more of yourself, because now you have more quantitative data instead of the normal qualitative data that we're used to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can think about it like a Fitbit for everything, and then maybe even you might be able to say like, oh, I'm 10% happier when I eat cheeseburgers or something like this, but really be able to quantify that.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that's very exciting for me, and something that I think is very promising is to be able to then find these correlations, be like, oh, when I eat chocolate ice cream,
No worries.
like somehow this isn't feeling good, but if I eat vanilla, then it's okay, so it can be. I think it can open up a lot of things, kind of these correlations that we wouldn't really see, and a lot of times to see it on ourselves is difficult.
It's difficult, yeah.
But for other people, you can see it on somebody else. Be like, oh, especially if you have kids or something like this, you're like, oh, wow, the kid, can't eat sugar or something like this, or I don't know, whatever. But you can find these correlations that are a little bit less visible, I guess.
Yeah. And also, yeah, going back to the physical thing, just tapping into organs and devices and the brain, you could, for example, have a camera that it's connected to your brain and be able to stream pictures that you can see. That's something that's already kind of happening right now, at least in the lower resolution side. But we could extrapolate it to the future and say, yeah, even if you took your eyes out, you could just put cameras in there, connected to your brain, and be able to see perfectly in 4K.
And you don't have to be limited to the visible spectrum. You can see X-rays, you can see
see
radio
ultraviolet.
waves,
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff.
I haven't
And
thought of that.
Who
Yeah.
says those cameras need to be connected to you? Maybe you're looking at something across the world.
Right.
There's no limits. Like really, there's no limits. You can do whatever you want.
Right. Yeah, I haven't thought of the ultraviolet. That one's interesting. Yeah, you can for sure expand whatever sensory experience that you have that you're not getting. You could even get like temperature detectors and be able to do like have you seen Daredevil? It's a comic book hero that it's since he got blind, then he can like feel micro air variations and temperature, and just with that he can, for example, see your face. So we could theoretically like do stuff with or similar to that. Like we could just put a bunch of sensors plugged into our brain and do stuff with that. Even plug it to the internet. Like just receive stock market data, and it's like, oh, I know the stock market is going up because I feel it. So it's like, oh, sell, stuff like that. Yeah, with what other crazy like medium future term possibilities can you see?
Yeah, a lot of those, are definitely possibilities, and people have already done that. They've put in chips under their skin, and they can, get into buildings, or they can,
Yeah.
unlock their door or something like this with their
Yeah.
actual, body or something like this. Again, kind of this cyborg,
Yeah.
idea. But yeah, I mean, the possibilities are endless. I mean, retinal implants are something that exists too, and so that's what you were talking about, was the being able to see, and this is something that is actually being researched right now, and there have been lots of people that were blind before, and or they had a disease that caused them to be blind, and with these implants they were able to see again. So this is, it sounds like science fiction, but it's not. It's happening right now, and so there's tons of stuff like this too, and I know a decent amount of companies, and so if you have specific questions or something like this, I could be like, yep, it exists, or no, it doesn't exist. Memory implants, that's another one that basically
Like implant memories.
so not like implant memories. It's almost like you can think of it like you remember, or you're at a heightened state of awareness, and so you remember much better. And so you can't. We're not to that level like in the Matrix, where it's like, oh, I know kung fu, and you can teach somebody kung fu, because that's a much more complicated thing that we don't really understand. But we can make it that if you're learning kung fu, and you can learn it faster because of this. You're in a heightened state of awareness as it's going on. So, yeah, just kind of crazy stuff. Whatever. It's weird because a lot of the stuff that sounds more science fiction-y is often easier than the other stuff. So really, how hard or easy it sounds, it doesn't really correlate to how hard or easy it is.
Yeah.
How actually it is. Yeah.
Okay, and like for example, playing music in your head, so not being able to have the headphones on, just taking your phone or just leaving your phone in the house and say, play Queen for the next 10 minutes, and you don't even need a speaker. You'll have like the electrical connections to sense music, or you can say music, you can say foods, so you could taste a burger without eating the burger, because at the end, that's like, people don't really like. I'm just saying this stuff because when I was reading more about this, I felt the impact this technology could have, and I would agree with many people that say this kind of, if at least half of the hopes that people have on this come true, like this could change like humanity, like completely. Like for example, you could get into questions that I was talking of, food and music, and like touch a button and have orgasms. So when that happens, like for example, questions of, would having those experiences directly transmitted to your brain take away from the real life experience? Do you have a take on that? Like for example, if I could just have my phone or whatever in the future and taste sushi, and I taste sushi, would I want sushi the next few hours?
Yeah, I mean that definitely it does feel like it would cheapen the experience, right? And maybe something, maybe not even sushi, like caviar, something special, that's difficult to get or expensive or something like this. I mean, honestly, I think that's kind of the path of humanity. Things that were impossible before, and things that were only for kings even 100 years ago. Now everybody has it, like I can have unlimited entertainment from around the world, and I have people acting and dancing and singing for me at a touch of a button. And,
It was unimaginable, yeah.
Yeah, it was unimaginable. Exactly. So does that cheapen it? Does Spotify cheapen music? And I mean, it just shortens it maybe by one step.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it's too bad. Definitely there are people that are going to be sucked into it and, become addicted and can't get out or something like this. The touch orgasm, maybe they just keep touching the button. But I don't know. I think that's always been an issue. I think that's always happened.
And it will continue to be an issue.
And it will continue, yeah. My thinking is always, with technology and progress and everything like this, it's more of the same but different. I would say same but faster, or same but more. So all technologies, I would say, is really just sped up the the interface or how quickly we can get something compared to, in the past or something like so. WhatsApp communication. Yeah, you could have written a letter and sent it, with somebody on a camel and give it to somebody and be like, send a smiling emoji or something like that, on a piece of paper or something like this. And that would have taken maybe a month or something like that. I don't know. And it would have cost a lot of money. Maybe, I don't know, a day's wages or something like that to be able to send something like that. Now we can send it on WhatsApp pretty much for free, but it's just a multiplier. It's just like how much faster, how much cheaper, how much better is it? And so I think a lot of these kind of direct, implanted in the brain stuff, maybe it cuts it down by, I don't know, maybe it's 10 times easier, 10 times better or something like this. But it's still something that's existed. It's not like a completely new thing that's, being invented. So I think it'll be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. I kind of agree, but for example, you could stretch it for a matrix type device, like where you completely detach. If you can feel, if you could listen to music, if you could savor music, you could just beam a video that instead of being here at UF, you're in Hawaii or in a castle with dragons and people are doing whatever you want and you're just always in pleasure. Yeah, that can get kind of scary, right? It can, for example, like in the medium term future, like VR stuff, like if one can immerse yourself outside of reality, then is that okay? Like, would you do it? Would you spend your life in a matrix type device if you can just be happier there?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't think I would, because I think you have these kind of like short-term pleasures and long-term
Right.
things. So maybe the short-term ones feel good in the moment, but then you might feel like, oh, I need to work towards my goals, or I need to kind of do these long-term things. And I think that's always going to be there. Yeah, but definitely. I mean, I think that it happens even now. Like young men, especially in video games and porn. Those are the two, and you can get lost in it and be like, whoops, there goes 5 years of my life.
Yeah.
It was pretty much
Yeah.
this, because they simulate a lot of this stuff that you're, I guess, looking for, these long-term goals, especially in video games, where you're building up your character over a longer period of time, finishing a mission that might take many weeks or months or something like that. So it kind of simulates life in that way, as you're progressing through life, and kind of get these different rankings or something like this, and work over years to build something. Then yeah, it kind of simulates it. Some people can get sucked into it. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and
it'll ruin some life. So,
and I've liked how you phrased it before, that this thing is always going to continue. So this thing, I mean technology, and technology is a tool, right? Maybe you can explain again, why is technology a tool?
yeah, I would say technology is neutral. Hammers are not positive or negative things. Like, it depends how you use it. You can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to kill somebody. So it's just how the person uses it. It's a multiplier. And again, you can multiply positive numbers, you can multiply negative numbers, but the multiplier itself, it doesn't change. So I think technology is exactly that. I think it's a multiplier, and so that's why I'm also, what I was saying before is, like, it's not adding anything completely new. Usually, most of the time, it's just multiplying what was before.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that. I would agree that it's up to us to decide what to do with that tool. It's up to the engineers, the designers, the users, the politicians. People should think about how to use this stuff and how it impact themselves, and then how it impact others, and just make decisions according to that, but not necessarily be afraid of technology, right? Because technology is not necessarily a bad thing.
And if you don't like technology, I mean, you can go live with the Amish, or you can go live in Papua New Guinea with the tribes and everything like this. But I mean, if you look at how many people actually do that, it's very little. It's very few people that actually do that, because technology is good, and it makes our life easier. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that nobody's going the other direction. Like literally nobody is like, I'm done with technology. I don't need plastics anymore. I don't need computers anymore. I don't need, clean drinking water, all this kind of stuff. I'm going to go back and live, like they lived a few hundred years ago or something.
Yeah.
Nobody does that.
Yeah, at least not too many people, or at least, yeah, because you could
One in 1,000 maybe.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
and you could argue, you could make the decision of making it smart, right? Of, oh, maybe I don't want to use social media because it affects myself and my behavior and my mood, but I do want to use my phone and be able to talk to my father and mother that are miles away. So yeah, it is choice, and it's up to you how you use that tool. And if you want to live with the Amish, but check your email once in a while, yeah, do that, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you can do what you want.
Right. So now that we've passed the creative side, I wanted to ask you, since you have the experience of talking with people that are in the field right now, what is the current state of the art? Like, what actually happens right now? What are the breakthroughs, and who's doing the breakthroughs? And that's kind of like a long question, but for example, maybe you could, if you can answer the long question, or you can just start with, for example, BlackRock. What are their goals, in at least in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, I think they want to make better interfaces, and they've also kind of gone into this wearable side of things. So it's not only the invasive, implantable, surgically implantable things, but also the wearable side. And the name of the game for most people is more electrodes, so more points of contact, more individual communication channels between the neurons. And when I was there, 96 channels was kind of like what they were at, and I think they're up to 256 now. And there's other companies that are even at like 40,000 or something like this. So they can theoretically engage with 40,000 different neurons and tell each of those to do something different. And kind of the benefit of that is that if you have more finer control over whatever you're trying to do. So if you're trying to move a robotic arm, instead of doing 1 degree of freedom where you can only open and close your fingers almost like a hook or something like this, you can move and play the piano and do some kind of more fine motor control, assuming you know how to play the piano. You can
play bad.
It doesn't matter. But yeah, with more electrodes, you can control more things theoretically. So people and companies are definitely wanting to up that, and mm-hmm. There's you may have heard of Moore's Law, which is a doubling of computer power every 18 months. And that's actually why all this technology is possible, because you double like that for, 60 years or 80 years or however long it's been going so far. That's a lot of doubling. And if I remember hearing something, it was like, if car technology and like the speed of cars doubled or went as fast as that, we'd be from here to the sun in like 5 seconds or something like this by now. And so, but anyways, there's a similar doubling of the number of electrodes in brain-computer interface or neural implant. And so it's not every 18 months, it's every 7 years that the number doubles.
Okay.
So you have a lot more factors, so it's slower.
It's a good progress, yeah.
But it's progress, and it's still kind of early to be showing that curve, but I think it's real, and basically you're doubling every 7 years, and so eventually we'll be at, like I said, 10,000, 100,000. The brain is supposed to have 80 billion 80 billion neurons, nerve cells, and so. Basically, as soon as we get to the 80 billion number, we can connect with every single part of the brain, and then at that point, definitely be like, "Oh, I know kung fu." But right. I think that's the biggest thing is kind of in increasing the channel counts and the finesse that they can control different things with, and you're more specific in what you're targeting, and you can target a much smaller thing and group of cells versus blasting a whole region with the electrical signal or something like this. You can be very precise in which nerves you're signaling with.
So I imagine there's companies trying all those approaches, right? I imagine there's not really a way that the industry has converged to doing things. There should be, or I imagine there's still like a lot of trial and error, and a lot of, oh, maybe we could tackle all this zone or this with this many electrodes, or just specific to this, or as you were saying, like tackle even a peripheral nervous system. So how would you describe the breakdown? How would you break up the companies? Like, is there a way that you break them down of these people are trying to solve this problem or introduce the technology in this way to consumers, and these other people are doing this other way? Is there, like, how do you think about this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this goes to the beginning of our conversation. Was like, how do you talk to a nerve? How do you kind of get it to fire? And again, you can do it electrically, you can do it physically, you can do it optogenetics, you can optically with light. You can have wearable, you can have implantable. So yeah, definitely. Like all these companies have these different ways of doing it, and it's not really settled, like which is the best way. And then maybe there might be best practices, best ways to do things for specific applications. So if you want to, a retinal prosthetic that has to be implanted into the brain to be able to see or something like this, maybe that has to be implantable. Maybe you can't do a wearable. Maybe you can't do optogenetics or something like this. Or maybe something where you're trying to block a nerve, block some pain, somewhere in the body or something like this. Maybe you shouldn't use electrical. Maybe you should use these kind of more physical, mechanical methods like ultrasound or something like this. So, it definitely is. There's categories of companies, and everybody's trying to figure it out. And, nobody can actually say that they've figured it out, until they've won in the marketplace, I guess. Like when you start seeing one company like taking over everything, then they'll be like, oh, okay. They had the right idea,
and there hasn't been so far.
I don't think so. It's still kind of a wild west. Everybody's figuring it out, and
but it's cool that there has been kind of recently an uptick in money being poured into this industry. For example, you could touch into Neuralink, that I would say has made this topic a little more mainstream. Right now, people like me that are not in the industry, we're aware that stuff that people are working on this stuff, right? So how have you seen the impact of Neuralink, and could you explain maybe what it is and how are they approaching things?
Yeah, so Neuralink is a Elon Musk company, and it's making brain-computer interfaces with kind of a sewing machine and like these threads that have a bunch of electrodes on them. I really like it. I think it's really cool. I think they've kind of taken the best of all technologies. And again, there's like 6 different, categories of people and everything that had to be involved in this. And so they've I think successfully taken the best components of all those. And, because it is Elon Musk, it brings a lot of attention to the field. So that was about the time that I started the podcast. And so I was almost a little bit like, oh, shoot, well, now everybody's going to know about it. But
it might be good. It's like, oh, nice. Now everybody's going to know about it.
Definitely. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, Elon, he's a master at raising money, and some people have called him like the best allocator of resources on the planet right now. And so I think his company Neuralink has raised $200 million, which is just incredible.
Wow.
That's a lot of money for our field. And what that also does is a lot of these companies like BlackRock, for example, another one, Synchron, last year 2021, they also got funding.
Yeah.
They also got like $20 million or $5 million, $10 million.
They can get into the hype, right? They can get
exactly.
into the
and it could be like,
excitement.
we're the Neuralink killers, we're the ones that are going to, take down Elon once and for all. So you kind of get these like rivalries of money.
Which is healthy.
And if you're in the middle of it, if 2 groups of people are throwing money at each other, and like whoever has the bigger pile of money in the end wins. That's awesome. That's a good place to be, is in the middle. That means you're not going to be limited by a lot of funding. And so, yeah, 2021 was like the max of, it broke all the records for the amount of funding that that these kind of neurotechnology companies have gotten, which has been awesome. Might say it's a bubble a little bit. We'll see, but we have to be able to live up to the promise of what we promise and then actually deliver it. But yeah, it's definitely brought in tons and tons of money. Up until now, it's mostly been government grants or defense research or just kind of maybe even like nonprofit or something like this. But now actual companies are being formed with actual business plans that are self-sustaining and that can actually, grow these technologies. So, yeah, it's kind of a great time to be alive, and great time to be in the field. It's been around for a long time. People have been sticking wires in the brain for 100 years now, but now it's actually coming into something. So it's pretty cool.
And what would you say is the commercialization goal of Neuralink? Like, what are they trying to do as a business?
Yeah, so Elon's stated goals is like to, if you can't beat him, join him. For artificial intelligence, he thinks artificial intelligence is going to take over the world and just we'll be house cats, and essentially everything will be controlled for us, and that it'll eventually kill us, and. Again, I don't believe that because I believe it's a neutral tool, and it just depends on whoever is holding, the tool. But yeah, we can have extremely powerful intelligence and everything around us, and it's not gonna be bad. But what they're actually gonna do, who knows? And I kind of see it as Starlink, and SpaceX and Starlink. Their stated goal is to go to Mars. But that's a really far goal. You're not going to make money for that for decades, right? SpaceX has been around for 20 years now, right? And they're still maybe 20 years away from going to Mars, and let alone making money from that, So up until that point, they're doing something called Starlink, which is basically selling low latency internet, to people in rural areas. And I'm like, wow, this is brilliant. So who knows what that's actually going to do? What Neuralink is actually going to go towards? Like the stated aim again is to fight AI, and to do this. But in the meantime, in the next 5 or 10 years or something, it might be something different. And there's a lot of stuff that's very promising, like what we talked about, that they could do. And something that we didn't talk about is something called deep brain stimulation. And basically what this is, it's stimulating very, very deep parts of the brain, not on the surface, but like very much at the core. And this has a lot of nice effects, like curing Parkinson's. So instead of you're not shaking, it kind of calms down your body, and it just kind of triggers certain circuits that just like calms it down, and so you can finally write or you can eat or something without your hand shaking. And they found that a lot of this is implicated with like things like depression, Alzheimer's, memory stuff, a lot of addictive things, so opioid withdrawals, alcoholism, obesity. A lot of times these are things that are addictive things, and maybe there's just some circuit that's always turned on and it shouldn't be turned on. You want to turn it off, and so you can do this like deep brain stimulation. That's what I think they're going to go after. I think they're going to eat these companies' lunch, the Medtronics, the Boston Scientifics that make these deep brain stimulators, because the ones that they use right now are very, very crude. And I think if you have these smaller, more precise, 10,000 channel electrodes versus the 8-channel ones that they use right now, I think it can be much more precise, and you can fix a lot of these things. So that's what I think their actual agenda is. That's their actual business plan over the next few years. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Where's the innovation in there? Because you mentioned the Medtronics is a very big company, Boston Scientific. Why wouldn't they go towards that route? What is Neuralink innovating in?
I think it'd be the size, the cost. So, because I think this is very similar to what SpaceX is doing. Up until then, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, they weren't really incentivized to lower prices, to make things faster, cheaper, safer, all this kind of, well, safer, yes, but not cheaper, because the government was paying for it. It was essentially unlimited money, and I think that's what's going on with the incumbent medical device companies right now too. Is you basically have insurance paying for it, or Medicare or something like this, which is, we can call it unlimited, deep pockets. And so if you have one of these surgeries, these procedures cost $50,000, $100,000, Doesn't matter. We don't care. Also, hospital prices are inflated, blah, blah, blah. So you wouldn't even be able to get that down. But I think, and again, this is what Neuralink had talked about is it would be kind of a inpatient procedure, so you would go into almost like a strip mall, almost like a LASIK eye surgery, and for a few $1,000s you could get this done. So basically at that point you could pay it out of pocket. You can't pay $50,000, $100,000 out of pocket. That's kind of a lot, but $3,000 is doable, especially if you're like, hey, you're gonna cure your obesity for $3,000, or you're gonna cure alcoholism, whatever, So I think that's huge. But these other big companies, they're not thinking about that, because it's just like, why would we spend lots of money to drop our prices by 10 times, and then what's the point of that? Like, why? They're just making so much money, they don't even want to think about it. They're making billions of dollars a year. So, but that's what the Elon companies do, in my opinion. That's what I've seen.
I would agree with that. Yes.
They've dropped rocket prices by like 10x, and like the Boeing, the Alliance, what was it? I can't think of the Alliance.
Rockets?
What's that?
Oh yeah.
Just the platform.
Vulcans.
The platform for them is more expensive
than the rocket,
than the whole rocket, and then everything, the whole package for SpaceX.
NASA's rocket.
Exactly.
NASA's rocket is like they're trying to just continue getting rid of all of it instead of reusing.
Yeah.
And they're just throwing it away.
Exactly.
Keep taxes pay for it.
Exactly. Yeah. Why would they lower prices? Why would they break their back to lower prices? But I think once you do that, then why would you pay 10 times more for something that's worse? And again, these United Launch Alliance is what it's called.
United Launch Alliance. Yeah.
It's also
ULA.
not only is it 10 times more expensive, it's like way slower. It's like 5 years behind schedule, and so these things take like decades. And then meanwhile, SpaceX is just boom, boom, boom. They're able to iterate very quickly. So I think that's going to be I think Neuralink is going to do similar stuff, actually.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have to, like United Launch Alliance is like, they're still innovating. They're still doing pretty cool things. But yeah, it's just, I would imagine it happens that you just get stuck. Like you just get used to how things are, how slow progress you're making, and yeah, you kind of like lose the spark of innovation that I would also argue that Elon pushes, and it pushes hard. So yeah, you could have like for example, would you work for Neuralink? And because I'm asking that question because the baggage of working for Elon, the baggage that working for Elon brings, like it's pushing, like it's as you were saying, like thinking of how to make it faster, cheaper, safer, and do it by next week. And like, would you work in companies like that?
Yeah, I think it'd be really good. So for me, I'm very much interested in the organization of it, and kind of the setup and what things look like, and from the inside, So I'm looking at it from almost like a managerial perspective. I think there's a lot to be learned from this. So I think it'd be really cool, and yeah, definitely, like he has a reputation for being a slave driver, and you're sleeping under the desk and doing crazy stuff that you never worked that hard in your life.
And people do that willingly.
Yeah, exactly, and for not much money, So, but I think it'd be really good, and despite career advancements and everything like this, a lot of people in Tesla or SpaceX or something like this, they work there for a few years and then they go make their own company, and because they have the name, hey, I worked in this company, they can raise lots of money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would do it. It'd be like, why not? But I think it'd be really nice to see something that moves that quickly.
Yes.
And
agree. At least for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. To see, because a lot of times in academia or government or something like this, again, you see the opposite. And something that you're like, okay, this should only take a week, might take 6 months or something like that. So. Yeah, no, I think it'd be good. Just for the organizational, aspects of it, I think would be, for me, that's the most interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and we've been talking about companies and the innovation that they're doing. But again, since you're there, you're way more expert than me. Like, what are the challenges? Like, what is holding innovation right now? Like, what would you say are the difficult aspects that's preventing this from advancing?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is actually what I'm working on is this the body rejects a lot of these things that are implanted into it, which makes sense. The body doesn't want random foreign objects in it because it's probably going to bring some kind of pathogen or weaken it or something like that. So I think that's a big part of it. Another big part, I think the brain is much more complicated than we think. And, I've kind of given a simplified model of like, oh, it's just electricity and they're talking with electricity. But we haven't talked about the different cell types. There's excitatory, inhibitory neurons. So like there's ones that if they're firing, they speed things up. And then there's other cell type that if they're firing, they slow things down. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. They're finding that in retinal cells, there's 20 different types of cells. The actual neurons, the actual, not just the actual retinal cells, but what communicates with the retinal cells. And I think I've heard the argument that this is probably what's going to happen in the brain too, is like we're going to find out there's 20, 25 different types of neural cells, and you can, I like to think of it almost like people or different cars on the road or something like this. So you got normal cars, you got like delivery vans, you got fire trucks, ambulances, you got all these different things. And right now we're just kind of turning off the stoplights, and we're just like, wow, look at all the stuff that happens if you turn and turn off the stoplights. But there's so much more going on. And now we have no idea, and like each one is doing their own thing and going their own place and doing their own thing.
And they could have kind of like the same principle of the engine to drive them, but do different applications and different functions.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They have the same mechanism, how they're actually working, but yeah, like a police car and a fire truck are doing different things. So, and they're going for different places at different times and everything like this. So, yeah, I think it's going to be similar to that. I think it's just going to be, we're going to find out like, wow, this is really complicated. And we're going to need some really powerful computers to be able to open that up. And we might not even understand what's going on. Like the computer will just be like, trust me, I got this figured out. You're never going to understand.
Yeah. You have no
this is a
idea.
100-dimensional matrix. Yeah, you're not going to understand this.
Yeah, and this could be places where you could have that interaction with machine learning and brain-computer machine interfaces where you have that amount of data that you're just trying to find patterns into it. So you just throw algorithms and you'll get answers, but you might not know exactly what the answers are. And with that comes interesting problems. For example, the privacy of it. Like when you have this much data and this much personal data of a brain, you could come into issues where what happens if somebody that you don't want has access to this data, and they could do something against you somehow. Like they could figure out that you have some sort of disease or something like that. I talked about this with a professor that's researching security and privacy and the intersection with machine learning with those. So, do you see also that as a challenge? Like, and how could people in the industry could start approaching those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about this, I mean, like we talked about, directly linking to the organs, and so you could have the pancreas like shut down. You could definitely could kill organs, right?
Right.
It can be extremely dangerous. It's almost like a pacemaker or something like this, where it can just shut it down. So, yeah, that's it's one thing to have your computer like lose its data and you get a virus or something like this, but yeah, if your pacemaker gets a virus, oof, that's really bad. Or the electrodes deep in your brain, if that gets a virus, oh man, I don't know, like you could die, and maybe you'd be even happy. Maybe there's even fates worse than death. But yeah, I mean, definitely like cybersecurity is very important, and you can do. I'm not an expert in this, so but I mean, you can have things that have direct links. Maybe it doesn't go over the internet. Maybe it doesn't connect to Wi-Fi, and so that increases the security. Like somebody has to actually bring a device to on top of another device or something like that to be able to read the data or change it or something like that. So that's something that could happen as well. But yeah, I know it's something we're gonna have to figure out, and it's gonna be an arms race between good guys and bad guys. Essentially, it's just gonna be like anything else, where you got a small amount of bad guys, but they have enough power, they can cause enough damage that you need like a larger army of good guys to always fix things up and patch things and everything like this. So, but yeah, no, that's
And there's also the multidisciplinary aspect of it, right? It's not only people researching, like neuroscientists that are researching the brain. There's also computer scientists that are dealing into these issues, mechanical engineers, and biomedical engineers. So that might also be a challenge, right? Like there's many problems, like small problems that you can look into, like because for example, your own research is, from what I've seen, is more like almost like material science kind of, right? Just like picking the right enclosure for these types of devices so that the brain doesn't attack it. So yeah, maybe you could touch a little bit more on that. Like what are interesting problems within that? Like how do you start solving, how do you talk with something that doesn't want to be talked to?
yeah, definitely. That's a question that a lot of men might have for dating. or anybody. Like, I want to talk to a famous person. I want to talk to Whitney Houston or something like that. And how do I talk to somebody who doesn't want to talk to me? She has no intention of talking to me. But yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I mean, this interdisciplinary nature. I mean, we're talking about like material scientists, electrical stuff. You have to be able to decode these. Maybe you're designing hardware, so you have to design ASICs. You're doing machine learning, so you have to be able to program this, and fabrication kind of stuff. You have to be able to know the neuroscience, the actual parts of the brain. Where are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing whatever? So it's such an interdisciplinary, and obviously if you want to do, business, you got to have the business side, and you got to have the regulatory side, the FDA side, and then you have to be able to talk with the patients, and you have to be able to talk with shareholders, and then your employees, and everything like this. So it's a very difficult thing. It's very interdisciplinary. I would say, yeah, maybe, again, I'm a little bit biased. It might be one of the most interdisciplinary thing. Just with one, small company, you could have people from 8 or 10 different fields that have to interact with each other, speak the same language, all this kind of stuff. And so I think that's a huge thing, but also it kind of makes it fun because you get to learn so much, mathematics and all these kind of crazy things that are somebody's specialty, and but you have to know it all, honestly. Or if you don't, then you have to be able to talk to somebody very quickly, very clearly, who does know, that part that you're looking to get into. So, yeah, it's crazy, and I mean, I think in this field there's something for everybody.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah,
yeah, it's awesome.
If you like this thing, and if you're mechanical, electrical, whatever, yeah, there's places like this that you could work on. Yeah, and we've been touching a little bit on the technical side, but also challenges that I saw is, let's say you're the president of the brain computer interface X, and you want to implant chips in the brain of people. How do you convince them to do that?
Yeah.
Like, how do you, because I asked this some friends yesterday, like, would you do this? And they asked me, yes, I would do it if they have data showing me that it's safe, but data of 50 years. So yeah, like, and there's just one person, like, you might not convince another person by just showing them data. And yeah, have you thought about this thing? Like, how do you convince something that, how do you convince someone that to take part of this industry as a consumer?
I mean, the need has to be there. If it's just like, hey, you'll be able to write tweets 20% faster if I opened up your brain, and put this experimental thing, you'll be like, no, I'm good. I'm not going to do that. It doesn't matter if you have 50 years, of data or not. But, somebody who's paraplegic, who can't move their arms and legs, that could be a very fast decision. Actually, the guy who did the fist bump with Obama, he was telling me that they
Oh, you
barely.
interviewed him?
I interviewed him.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
Nathan Copeland. Yeah, and he was saying that they didn't even finish describing it, and he's already like, "Yes, I'm in. I want to do it." Because for him, he's in a wheelchair. He can't move his arms and
Yeah.
legs, and so for him, it's a big thing. And then on top of that, he's a pioneer in science, and it's pretty exciting stuff for that. But I think basically the need has to be bigger than the potential risk. So you got a risk reward kind of thing, and your reward has to be bigger than the risk. So people have to, and people are smart, and so they'll be able to weigh it. They'll be able to determine in their own situation, is the risk bigger than the reward. And I think that's honestly it. And that's probably why it hasn't expanded, or it hasn't grown as much as it probably could, because the risk is there. Like for computers and everything like this, what's the risk of getting a nicer computer? Nothing. It costs you money, whatever. Not a big deal. But for this is like, okay, what's the risk of somebody opening up your brain and putting something inside? Well, that's a pretty big risk. Like, you don't have to be smart. You can be the dumbest person on the planet. You'd be like, I don't know about that. That doesn't sound like it's got to be a really good deal for me to be able to do that. I got to really fix some big problems to be able to agree to something like that. So I think that's pretty much it, is risk reward, and that's why wearable neurotechnology is so much more attractive, because it's just a helmet. It's just headphones that you put on, and you don't have to open up anything.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting right now that, tell me if I'm correct in this, that maybe a limitation is that, or for the past year, the risk for normal people has been outweighing the rewards. So how do you test this technology right now is for people that are disabled, or that they kind of move, or they have this big disease, or alcoholic, or they're obese. And yeah, I mean, is that kind of how you've seen it? That from the past years, like, the testers have been people, like, not the regular people, like people with specific conditions, that this would make them more attractive. This technology would make it more attractive for them.
Yeah, I mean, up until now, it's been mostly being focused on the prosthetic side of things. So definitely people that are missing an arm or leg, or can't move their arms or legs. That's because it is much a clear risk reward. Like, hey, you can't move, and you'll be able to move a robotic arm. It's, not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And like kind of what you were saying, you have independence, you have self autonomy, and you're able to do this. So that's kind of more attractive for that. But yeah, I think as we find out more and more things, especially in the addiction side of things, I think that's going to be much easier. Or you're going to see a lot more patients, and kind of quote unquote normal patients. Like, just by looking at them, you'd be like, they don't look different or anything like this. But obviously, if somebody's can't move in a wheelchair, you can look at them and be like, okay, that's different. But no, I think it's going to be more and more mainstream, more and more normal people. But yeah, and again, the data has to be there. Like, you can't just say something like, "Oh, I'm going to cure addiction. I'm going to cure alcoholism," or something like this. People are going to need to see the data, see that it works.
Yeah, and it's difficult even with the data, because normally data doesn't really convince somebody. And that has been interesting, because in the field that I'm interested in self-driving cars, it's the same issue. Like, how do you convince somebody that this car is safe just by showing data?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, trust me, or like, here are some graphs and plots that show you that you will be okay, and your time, you won't have to bother driving, and you won't have to, you could do other things while you're driving. Your commute will be faster, whatever the benefits are. The big negative is, like, you could get into a car crash. So people are like, maybe I'll pass, at least for a few years. Like, it's a difficult problem, right? Like, introduce them to this, like, innovation just with facts and statistics. Like, that's not really that convincing, right? And I guess what you would respond is the reward has to be way stronger than their feelings.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, data is not a very human way to approve something. Actually, I would say a lot of people, you kind of have this innovators curve and everything like this. So you get the early adopters. It's the 5-10% of people that are like, those are maybe the ones that are swayed by data. And then you get the people that come later and everything like this. But I think basically you have to see somebody use it. And a friend, probably.
Yeah.
You have to have a friend, have full self-driving, and then have them use it for a long time and be like, hey, what do you think about it? Maybe take a ride in the car or something like that. I think that's much more, that'll sway a lot more people than data. That's what's going to sway, the 80% of people.
Yes.
The first 5 or 10%, the crazy ones. The crazy ones that they'll try anything and then they'll be swayed by the data. And then the 80%, the middle 80%, that's, kind of the ones that need to see it to believe it, I guess. And then the last 5, 10%, 20% are kind of the ones that are like, okay, everybody else is already doing it. It seems safe enough. Or maybe they don't even do it.
Yeah,
like not everybody has a smartphone, right? Like some people have, the dumb phone still. Yeah, flip phones. So they just might never do it, So, but that's fine. That's good for them. So yeah, I think you're going to have to just see people do it, and that means, you need millions of patients, millions of full self-driving users, and then let's say 1 out of 20 people has full self-driving. How long before you would talk to that person and maybe even drive with them or something like this? It might be a year or 2, 3 or something like this before you get to that conversation. And so I think you kind of have this time constant as well. So you could have a lot of people, relatively speaking, that are doing it, and they're maybe evangelizing, they're talking about their story a lot, but it's still not that fast, I guess. So you'd still need a few years of it just kind of settling through.
Like people to get used to the idea,
exactly.
like seeing their cousins, like, oh, maybe I'll try it.
Yeah. I think that's how it's going to have to go,
Yeah.
Be like, oh, you have a brain implant? What? I didn't know that. I couldn't tell.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. Oh, is that why you got rid of the alcoholism and lost 50 pounds? Oh, and how do you like it? And has it been working well? Is it does it hurt? Was it expensive? All these kinds of things, and then you'd be like, wow, I'm pretty I'm addicted to video games or something like this. Oh, maybe I could do it. Oh, okay, yeah. Maybe do you have a good guy that you can talk to? And I'd like to learn more about it or something like this. So that's a very human conversation, I would say. That's a very typical. Yeah. That's probably how it's going to go, honestly.
Yeah.
And again, if somebody has a bad experience, no, man, my cousin died. I have it too, but my cousin died because of it, or he's paralyzed now because of it or something like this, then that can also obviously sway it in the opposite direction. So, but that's how humans work. And I think it's good.
Yeah. I like being human for now. So for example, what would, you've mentioned risk versus reward. What would be your reward to have something implanted in your brain?
Yeah. So brain again is a bit higher of an ask,
Okay.
and I think, I don't know. I think it'd have to be the focus and what I'm obviously very much enamored with this the Matrix style, I know Kung Fu. It'd probably have to be that, honestly, where you can learn anything or you can download information or something like this and be like, oh yeah, what year was the Battle of Hastings? As you put it into the conversation, you just kind of come up with it, and so you'd look like the smartest person in the world. Everybody like, wow, he knows his, I don't know, he knows his 14th century poets really well. How
and
is
the
that?
Google in your
amazing?
brain is
yeah,
got you,
exactly.
bro.
It'd probably have to be something like that. So that being said, for a peripheral nerve implant, I think that the ask is much lower. So for somebody to be like, hey, we want to plug in, an electrode into your arm nerve, I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's dangerous. That can potentially leave me with a paralyzed arm or something like this, or cause issues or pain or phantom, God knows what. But it's still better than opening up your skull and
Yes.
putting something in your brain, So that ask would maybe need to be smaller. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we could still do the Matrix style stuff with it, but it could be smaller. Hey, I don't know. We can read your health or something for your whole organism or whole body or something like that. And so, yeah. And then if it's wearable, hey, put on these headphones. It'll help you focus 30% better. Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Especially if I get it for free, like if money's not an
exactly.
issue, then the ask or the risk reward is much lower. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think with me too. I've been interested in the idea of like wearable devices, like even like Fitbit type devices that you can just log data of pressure and blood and like simple stuff like that. That could tell you a lot, right? That you could, if you know what to do with that data, that could really be a super useful piece of information. Like for example, people that have the device that tells you like, oh, you're close to a heart attack, like pay attention. That's like if it's easy enough to just put in, if it's cheap enough, I would, yeah, sign me up. Yeah, if it's safe enough, yeah. So maybe we can switch to the more personal side. Uh, what is the joy of traveling? Like, you have your travel wisdom podcast. Why did you start it, or like why have you continued it, and why do you what are you trying to communicate to people with that podcast?
Yeah, so the point of the podcast is that traveling is more than a vacation, but it can be a learning experience. And I love traveling. I haven't done too much since I moved to Florida now 4 years ago. But before that, I was studying in Germany, and in Europe, it's very easy to travel. And like you said, I deported to Siberia, and so been to 100 countries. So I really like it because it forces you to be awake and to be alive and to like try to survive, because if you're in, Uzbekistan and you don't know where you're going to sleep and, you're hungry, you got to figure out food and everything like this. That's a very unique experience, and you're going to have to, figure some stuff out and kind of do a lot of things that other people don't have to do. And it's fun, and you learn from it, and it's kind of a learning experience. You get to know yourself better, what you can and can't do, and what you do under pressure, everything like this. So, and obviously you see cool things and be a part of history and see things as they happen somewhere, something like this. So, yeah, it's really exciting stuff, and I was trying to, I guess, justify it to myself a little bit, but like, okay, I like this hobby. I'm spending a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money on this, and it should be more than just a hobby or something like this. It should be something that's building my future or something like this. So that was kind of my way of doing that. And I was talking to people like, okay, is travel just travel, a vacation, or it can be something that plants seeds for success later in life. And so I've kept it up because it's just so easy to keep up a podcast and kind of slow down sometimes with the uploads, but it's a good way to talk to interesting people that are outside of my brain computer interface space. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and even you've mentioned many benefits. Also, like the human connection that you get into those places. It might be difficult because of language barriers in some places, but just to be able to communicate with somebody that might not even know, like just through sign languages, you can learn a lot. I mean, you could learn about many different perspectives that people have, different cultures, and yeah, probably you've done that quite a lot. How would you say, how has that impacted you personally, and how have you tried to overcome language barriers?
Yeah, so you basically realize that you can more or less communicate whatever you need to do. And honestly, if you have money, if you walk into a restaurant and you don't speak the language, but you have $20 in your pocket, they'll figure it out. They'll know. Like, it's not a big deal, like people will try to help you. First of all, it helps them, and maybe financially or something like this. Second of all, they feel good because, they see some lost person who doesn't really know, wearing their shoes on their hands, like kind of just completely this alien from another world. But, and so you get to help, like almost like a child. It's kind of nice. But, Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's usually not that hard, and people will figure it out. And if you're trying to go somewhere, you just say the name of the city or the name of the place that you're trying to go, and then people will like point you in the direction. So it's usually not too bad. It's just gonna be kind of scary because
Yeah.
we're used to having a control, and that maybe that's why I liked it too, is because you almost become a child, and you almost, depending on where you go, what everything like this, how different your language and culture is and everything like this, you become, you're not an adult anymore that can communicate your thoughts effectively. You are like a 4-year-old child that needs people to survive, and it's a weird feeling, and it's really cool to go through that, and it's very humbling. So I think it's something that people need to experience, and it's a fun experience to do. It's difficult. It's not fun. I mean, it might not be fun. It could be very stressful, and you could feel like you could die or something like that. But yeah, usually it's not too bad. And yeah, with language stuff, I mean, you learn a few words, and people are like, "Oh my God, you're an expert at the language. You're so talented." And you say, "Wow, thank you. I am pretty talented." So, but it's fun. It's just a really, I highly recommend it, and you can usually travel for very, very cheap, and yeah, it's just awesome.
How have you approached the problem of learning a language?
Yeah, so I've learned a good amount of languages, and honestly, you just have to not be afraid of looking like an idiot. Again, you're going to look like a child. You're going to go from, communicating like a 20, 30-year-old or something like this to communicating like a 3-year-old. And that's if you're already pretty good. You might be communicating at a 1-year-old level, like, hungry, kind of thing for a long time. And you just have to get used to it, that you're going to look like an idiot. And you're going to study for years and hundreds of hours, and then you're going to talk like an 8-year-old. And you're gonna be able to talk about very simple concepts and everything like this. But if you get into philosophy, oh man, like you're not gonna, like, I have no idea, I couldn't tell you. But yeah, so you just have to put in the time, honestly. And there are maybe shortcuts, there are multipliers, there's people that are talented and they're better. But let's say they learn, they're some super freak genius, that somehow their brain chemistry is twice as fast as you. Great, they're twice as fast as you. They still have to put in hundreds of hours of study to be able to do this. And there are charts basically saying, like, if you start usually with English and you want to learn X language, this is how many hours it's going to be. So usually the Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Norwegian, those are kind of the easiest ones. And I think that was on the order of like 500 hours of study. So 300 to 500 hours of studying, of like dedicated, like you're sitting down, you're learning this stuff, or lessons or something like that. Level 2 ones are like the Arabic, Thai, Russian, Polish, all this kind of stuff. Kind of like more difficult grammatically. Words are different and everything like this. Those are, on the order of 1,000 hours of dedicated study. And then there's like the Uber, the Japanese, the Chinese, the crazy languages that have like zero relation to English, and that's on the order of 2,000 hours. So again, let's say you have this genetic freak that's like twice as good. They're still gonna have to put in at least a few hundred hours of study, which is a lot of time, a lot of dedicated hours, a lot of weeks of like doing lessons and really focusing on it. So that's really it. Just focus and dedication, and then you have to have a reason to do that. Like, you have to have a reason to spend hundreds of hours, many, many weeks. You're not just going to learn Norwegian if you don't need to, but if you're living there, if it somehow helps your life, yeah, you might learn Norwegian over a year or two and get pretty good at it and spend tons of time, effort, money, everything into it. So, unfortunately, that's the that's the secret. Is there is no secret.
Interesting. But have you had some sort of process in the languages that you've heard that you've learned? For example, like taking a class, like learning grammar, or just speaking with people, or like going to a class and having conversations with other people, learning that as well.
So for me, yeah, the grammar is not very fun, like grammar tables, verb tables, everything like this, which is how, unfortunately, classes classrooms, teachers teach this
Normally,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. And to me, it's kind of the backwards, because you don't need to know the grammar until you need to know the grammar. Like, you'll know when you need to know the grammar. Like, people don't understand you. You got the words right. You got everything, but they just don't understand you, or think you speak like a caveman or something like that. So that's honestly usually a little bit later. For me, I like the most fun part is honestly learning the words, and just doing kind of vocabulary. So there's apps and stuff like this, almost like flashcards, where you go through and you learn the vocabulary. And so I especially like the apps. It was just kind of a fun way to do it, and to automatically keep track of everything. So the flashcard one is called Memrise, and that's a good way to learn this, and it has nice little ways to remember things. So Die Gesellschaft in German means the society. So it's like, oh shit, that's a hard word, But you can think about it like, somebody uploads like a little cute way to remember it. It's like, what kind of society would we be if we let gazelles die in shafts? Like mine shafts, and boom. So you just like integrated all the words.
Okay,
and
tricks like that.
Tricks
Okay.
like that, exactly.
Okay.
And so you can remember certain words very easily, because you're like, oh yeah, what kind of
Approaching
society
them
would
with
be?
something, creating stories
Exactly.
with the word.
Exactly. Or like, oh yeah, it sounds like this, and it's similar to this or something like this. So that's really cool. Another one I like is Duolingo, and people actually, a lot of language learners don't like it.
Really?
They hate on it. Yeah, but I learned a good amount of languages with it, and because it's fun, it's easy. It's colorful, and you got a little owl and is crying if you get something wrong. So you want to make the owl happy, and so you're doing like sentences, and it's just practice. You're just doing the hours and hours of practice, and it's a good way to do that. That's a little bit more fun, maybe more like a game. And and then there's also, I would highly recommend classes. So Zoom classes, especially now after the pandemic, everything like this. That was a good way to do it. And there was a service called Lingoda, and basically, if you were able to do a certain amount of classes per month, then you would get a discount, and so it was a kind of a fun way to, maintain, this effort and everything like this. But I think that's a really good way. So definitely later on, you need the classes, but also in the beginning to just talk with people and everything like this, and that way it's actually useful for you, and not just some academic exercise, learning vocabulary or something like this. You're actually using it. So it's fun, it's good, but yeah, it takes a lot of time.
Cool. And I think we're wrapping things up, but before that, what advice do you have for people maybe trying to get started into your field and not knowing exactly how? What would you say?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll tell people to do what I did. I didn't go through the front door. I went through the side door. I jumped through the window, and did the kind of uncommon thing. Like, I started a podcast to get a PhD. Like, that's a very strange thing. And a lot of what I had done, I was never really a good student, but basically I did a lot of cool projects, and did a lot of cool things that got me into the master's, got me later into the PhD, and did all this weird stuff that's just kind of different, and you just got to follow your own path. And unfortunately, the scholarly, academic side of things, it's good, and it can show that you're like, a good worker and diligent, and are smart and everything like this. But you can also show creativity and resourcefulness, and just kind of outside the box thinking in other ways too. So I had entered a business plan competition, or I had gotten funding for some business ideas that I had, or started the podcast and starting all these like businesses and everything like this. So you can definitely do. I would say if you do what everybody else does, you're going to get what everybody else gets. So you have to do the different thing, the weird thing. Again, that's probably just my personality. I like the weird. I can't do what everybody else is doing. I got to do the weird thing. But I think it's good. I think it's a good way to do it. And be weird.
I like it.
Yeah.
Final question: what are you grateful for?
Yeah. So gratefulness. I'm grateful for this whole system, like all this invisible stuff that we're like walking on and using, and just internet and just all this. We don't know how it works. Like, explain internet, like, I don't know, where does it come from? All this kind of stuff. And it's kind of magical that we live in a, such a functioning society. Because again, like traveling around the world, I've seen a lot of places where it doesn't function so well. And, next day Amazon delivery that's not on their radar as a reality at all. So, it's amazing. And so, yeah, honestly, it's, I've always kind of been reluctant to, be like, oh yeah, America's great. But like, America's pretty awesome. And the West is pretty great because, I've seen the alternative, and it's fun. It's good. It's entertaining, but like, if you want to get something done, it's not good. And if you want to, do like high level science, or you want to talk to really smart people, or whatever, then you do need this system. And another thing I found out is why I went back to the U.S. is the funding here is great. There's money for this kind of stuff, and honestly, you need it a lot of times. You can't have zero funding, and things are held together with bubble gum and sticks and everything like this. It's nice to have nice stuff. So it's kind of been a big realization, but I kind of came back with my tail between my legs a little bit. I was just like, oh, I guess America's actually pretty good. So you got to be grateful for the small stuff, the invisible stuff that makes things work.
Appreciate so much, man. Yeah, I really loved it. So
thanks for having me. This was fun. I think that's kind of the path of humanity. Things that were impossible before, and things that were only for kings even 100 years ago. Now everybody has it.